Hello, everyone, and it's time for another edition of MLB This Week. It's the MLB This Week Show. We're talking about Minnie Minoso. He passed away. He's being honored by Chicago. Another big story in baseball, a look at the best and worst logos in baseball, some food notes, of course, and a whole lot more. So tune in to this edition of MLB This Week. And hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of MLB This Week, the MLB This Week podcast, talking all about baseball. How you doing, Gary?
I'm good, Rich. How are you this week?
Not too bad, and we're doing the podcast on a Saturday afternoon, probably one of the few times that we've ever done a show on Saturday and the afternoon.
Yeah. Well, you know, Saturday usually running errands to get the things that you need to get after a long week of work.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, of course, as we've been telling you about in the podcast over the past few weeks, we had some more snow in the past couple of days. But thank God for spring training, Gary. Of course, we have a great lineup of games starting at 1 p.m. today. Your Mets are playing the Braves, and the Phillies are taking on the Blue Jays down in Clearwater.
Well, my wife is out for the day with her friends, so I am going to finish the show and maybe open up a cold beer and sit and watch the Mets take on who I don't know who they're even playing, but because they got a split squad today. But I'm going to enjoy this ball game.
Yes, it's time for enjoying, and even though we've had some rough news in the last podcast, we're going to make this show a little lighter. Hopefully, we had some bad stories last week, but starting right off, we're talking about Google Plus, and of course, that's the platform that we use for the show to record the show, and also for people to follow us there and find out more about what we're up to. We had some news in the past week, Gary, that possibly Google Plus will be broken up. But I don't think it's going to be broken up as bad as people are thinking it is.
Well, they seem to be very successful with this Hangouts thing, so I can't see them getting rid of that completely. They've always been threatening about dumping different things. I know there's a program, FeedBurner, that they've been threatening to close down, and people use it. It seems to work. So why close down? Why mess with a good thing?
Yeah, a lot of podcast shows in the past week were really down on the fact that Google Plus. A lot of them were talking about we're going away with Google Plus. You know that the whole network would be dismantled, and of course Google Plus sort of competes with Facebook in the terms that you can keep up with family and friends. You can share stories there, things like that. It's not as popular as Facebook, but it's not as, ad-centric as Facebook either, Gary. I kind of prefer Google Plus over Facebook.
Yeah, I think the problem with Google Plus is that it's a little complicated. It's not, Facebook's pretty simple to figure out. They give you a thing right there, you type in it, and that's it. Google Plus, it seems like there's a lot thrown at you, and sometimes they have the double entries and everything, and I think it can be too confusing. And I think that's why people don't use it as much. I do like Facebook. I use both. I like Facebook because it seems more people of different stripes are on it. More of my regular friends that aren't technologically into things, so they're on Facebook. And Twitter, I don't know. I think I'm too old for Twitter. Twitter I use, but it's just too darn fast for me.
Yeah, you get a certain stream of news with Twitter. You could search a baseball team or something like that when the game's going on, and you can hardly read the feed because there's so many tweets coming past, but it's very useful. It's a great modern feature to gather news and things like that. I guess it depends all how you use it. But we're glad to be doing the show with you today on Saturday, March 7th. We got a whole lineup of great baseball talk stories to talk about with you. And Gary, you have one of the top stories of the week here, Minnie Minoso passing away.
Well, yeah, NBA All-Star and White Sox legend Minnie Minoso passed away earlier last week, and on Friday evening, the Blue Cross Blue Shield building in Chicago illuminated its windows in white and blue to honor Minnie Minoso, who wore number 9 in his years with the White Sox. He spent 12 of his 17 MLB seasons in Chicago with the Sox, and Minnie became a legend there in Chicago. And Rich, another instance of another great ball player passing away. Guys that we might have just missed. I think I seem to remember seeing him, but he was very late in his career. And you know, we're getting up at that age, and they're way up in that age. And but it was nice that the city of Chicago remembered him, and of course honored him with the changing of the lights in the building. And they did the same thing a few weeks ago for Ernie Banks. So they love their players in Chicago. It doesn't matter what side of the Chicago they're playing for. They love them. And a good ball player, Minnie Minoso. Don't know. Some people say he should be in the Hall of Fame. I have to look at his numbers again. Not quite sure about that, but a nice honor for a legendary player.
Yeah, and I'm looking over his MLB stats. I don't recall him as a player. His seasons took him up to 1964 with the White Sox, but he also was added to the lineup by the Chicago White Sox in 1976 and 1980. He appeared in a couple games at the age of 50 and 54, and I don't really recall that either, but that's pretty interesting that the Sox would bring him back to play in a couple games during those years.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, you know, I vaguely remember it, and I don't know whether or not it was just, it apparently it wasn't for any playing time to increase his pension or whatever, but I guess he was still in pretty good shape at that time, and they thought, what the heck, this would be a nice gimmick to get people into the stadium.
Yeah, and as you said, he had a great career, lived to the age of 90, was born in Cuba, signed by the Cleveland Indians as an amateur free agent in 1948. So yeah, Minnie Minoso goes back, and he's a big name. Probably looking on baseballreference.com here, he's one of the top 100 players in fan rankings all time. A couple players behind Mike Piazza. So yeah, Minnie Minoso was a household word in baseball through the 50s and right on through the mid-1960s. So he'll be missed by baseball, but like you said, Gary, Chicago has a good knack about honoring their own, and they do a really good job on it.
Yeah, they certainly do, and that'll take us into your first story of the day, and they have some nice logos out there, at least I think so, but you've got a story about the best and the worst logos in baseball.
Yeah, what we like a lot about our baseball teams, whoever your favorite team happens to be, is usually the logo that's associated with them, and of course they appear on apparel, merchandise, hats, things like that. And just the other day, in athlonsports.com, that's one of my favorite sites to find out about preseason baseball and baseball throughout the season. They had a professional graphic designer guru, they call her, Daly Cantrell, and she did the honor of critiquing each MLB logo and ranked them accordingly. And her favorite logo of all the major league teams, of course there's 30 teams, is the Detroit Tigers, Gary. And she says it stands on its own. It's easy to see on a page, a uniform. It doesn't need any words or extra colors to communicate what it represents. It's that sort of old-style capital D. So, she says it's simple yet creative and has an old-school feel. So that's her favorite pick for the top logo. Coming in at number 2 is the LA Dodgers. Of course, they have a baseball in the background over the Dodgers logo, and she says that works out well. It's a feminine approach on a masculine logo that works well without overdoing it. So that's our top 2 logos in baseball. Following closely right behind those is the Chicago Cubs. Of course, they have the big C encircled by a blue circle with the word Cubs in it. They said it's a very simple yet classic logo, and it's an example of effective use of circles in logos. So those are top of her few picks. Now we'll go on to some of the bottom picks. And Gary, before I go with those, what's your favorite logo in baseball?
Well, it seems like she's mixing though cap logos and team logos, because there's a lot of teams that have nice looking logos, and I mean the Tigers, for instance, have the D, but they also have a tiger coming out of the D as a logo. So I don't know what she's using as a criteria. It seems like she likes the plain logos. She's mentioning the Dodgers and the Cubs, but mine, of course, is the Mets.
And who would have thought? Who would have thunk it? Yeah, let's read a little bit about what she says about that Mets logo. Of course, with the city in the background highlighted, with Mets in the middle, encompassed by an orange circle. She says, what is going on with how busy this logo is? It's necessary to have a cityscape, a bridge, and a baseball stitching all crammed into one little logo. So she's asking, is it necessary to have all those things crammed right in? I kind of like that Mets logo. It kind of reminds me of the Phillies one, which the Mets logo ranked at 24 on the list, and the Phillies logo, of course, has a Liberty Bell in the background with Phillies over that, and then sort of a baseball diamond type of red logo encompassing that. She says she's a huge fan of this shape of the logo. Inside a baseball-like shape, it gets a little cluttered when made smaller. So this is, again, a professional graphic designer, and these are just her opinions, but it's interesting to see what she says about them. We already talked about the top 3. Let's go with the bottom 3. The Houston Astros. It's got the H in front of an orange star with Houston and Astros on the top and the bottom. She says nothing stands out about this logo at all, so she doesn't care for that too much. Right behind that is the Colorado Rockies. What she says about that is, I feel like this was done with clip art, also using different fonts and having 2 colors on the text make it harder to read. And yeah, I've never been a big fan of that Colorado Rockies logo, but Gary, the worst logo, according to this graphic artist, the Tampa Bay Rays. She says there are a bunch of things about this logo that I'm not a fan of. And of course, it has rays over top of a sort of inverted rectangle, which looks like a baseball field almost, but not quite. What she says about it, the biggest is the diamond in the background. She's not a fan of. It takes away from the text too much and makes it harder to read. She would take it off completely. And yeah, it sort of does sort of hide the Rays logo in that as well. I would have to agree with her on that.
Well, Rich, that all of these teams now have multiple logos. So I don't know. It's I think you have to look at everyone as a whole and uh, different ones. I know the NY here that the Mets have is that's prominent on a number of stuff. Of course, she mentioned the buildings and the bridge, but I think you have to understand also the meaning behind some of these logos. I mean, for instance, with the Phillies, it makes sense with the Liberty Bell. That's Philadelphia. Um, it's the skyline of New York with the bridges that bring the boroughs together, because New York City is 5 boroughs. It's not just one landmass, and they're connected by bridges. That's the idea of the bridges and the skyline. And of course, it's inside of baseball because it's a baseball logo. Um, the Rays. What can you do? I mean, they have another logo. I'm looking at, and it's a blue circle with rays and a ray. The actual fish or mammal or whatever it is. I'm not a scientist, so please no emails about
Stingray.
that. Stingray, yeah, not the Corvette either.
Right.
In it, and it's very simple, very nice. And so I don't know. To me, almost the ugliest to me looking at it. It's hard to say. I mean, never been a fan of the Diamondbacks, whether it was the A or the rattlesnake or the Diamondback snake. They could be one. Not a big Cardinal fan, but they have one of the best looking logos, I'd have to say. Even though I hate the Cardinals, and Cincinnati, the same thing, but they got Mr. Redlegs there. He's pretty cool. I don't know. Seattle Mariners. What is that? It's like a compass or something, but it's a baseball. I don't know. It's like anything else. It's the fans love their logos for their team, and whoever looks at this article, if their team is not mentioned highly, such as the Mets, we're not gonna like the article. So, to each their own. I don't know.
What can you say? It's all about opinion, and this person obviously doesn't like complicated logos, so anything with a little complication is automatically thrown out in her mind. So that's an interesting look on baseball logos. And of course, this is the time for all those merchandise sales, and also we'll have to see what happens to be the best merchandise. Maybe we'll talk about that on the next show of MLB This Week. But we want to thank you for listening to the show, and also mention that you can find us on our website at MLBThisWeek.com. You can see the video version of the show there. And Gary, last week we were towards the end of the show, and I couldn't turn the Google Hangout off, and we completely became unglued. We lost it. With laughter. So if you want to check out some great moments of podcasting, check out the final 2 minutes of our show from last week. That would be show number 40.
Yeah, it was definitely a different week last week. That's for sure.
Yes, it was one of my favorite shows. Hey, if you're having fun and you laugh a little bit, that's not a bad thing for sure.
There you go.
But moving on with the show, you had mentioned that the Mets are taking on the taking on the Braves, and the Braves are at it again with injuries. I haven't heard of this.
Well, last year the Braves saw an unfortunate run of injuries in spring training, included Tommy John surgery for Chris Medlin and Brandon Beachy, 2 important members of their rotation last year. And it was kind of a bad sign for them, and it ended up where they did not have that good a year, and they got rid of their general manager and made a lot of changes in their roster. We've even said on this show, we don't know what the heck they're doing, and even one of their key players changed his name. So it's been a really crazy time for the Braves the last year or so. But injury bug seems to be striking again. First, it was center fielder Melvin Upton Jr. See, he changed his name, and then he came down with a rare foot condition. And now, once again, a starting pitcher, Mike Minor, is on the sidelines with shoulder soreness. In fact, he is going to go to see Dr. James Andrews for a second opinion. Minor had a down season last year with a 4.7 ERA and 25 starts. The year before, however, he was excellent. He went 13-9 with a 3.21 ERA in 32 outings. So Braves are not having a lot of luck the last couple of years, and can't say that I'm very, very upset about that, but that injury bug again. We talked about it last year between the obliques and the Tommy John surgeries, and watching a good, interesting show, 60 Minutes Sports on Showtime last night, and they had a segment about the Dr. Tom House, the USC Trojans pitching coach, who has got some different ideas on throwing and uses different technology. And he says the easiest pitch to throw is a curveball if thrown properly. And we can remember our days of growing up and playing ball, and coaches would say, do not throw a curveball. Well, apparently that's an old school thought, and he dispels a lot of myths. He believes throwing across your body's okay. So it's an interesting thing, and the only reason I mention it is I happen to watch $1 Million Arm as well recently, and he's prominently featured in that. So Tom House has some different ideas, and I think baseball's starting to come around. They've started that website, Pitch Smart, and trying to get kids to avoid, hopefully, some of the injuries that have happened. We've had a lot of star pitches in the last couple of years go down. Matt Harvey's coming back. Jose Fernandez with Miami wins the Rookie of the Year, and then next year, or last year I should say, comes down with Tommy John surgery. Strasburg, Wainwright, the list goes on, and Jeremy Hefner with the Mets, he's on his second one now, and there's been a couple of the Braves, as we've mentioned, Medlin and Beachy. So they're gonna do something about this, hopefully. But for now, it doesn't help the Atlanta Braves, and they're starting off the season, or the preseason at least, not on a good note.
Not at all. And as you said, we've talked a lot about the pitching injuries over the past year, 2014 season, and a lot of it is these guys are trying to throw 100 miles an hour, and they're throwing their arms out and doing more damage with their elbows and all. But also looking towards the Braves preseason here, they're predicted to do 4th place in the NL East here in my Athlon preseason magazine here, and the Braves have had a rough time in the past couple of years, Gary. They came very good in 2013 with 96 wins. They had 94 wins in 2012, but only 79 wins last year. So the Braves are not really talked about in the rebuilding mode, but they're certainly suffering with something down there, injuries, a combination of losing Bobby Cox maybe from over the years, and their top flight Hall of Fame players. Braves are sort of like the Phillies. They sort of toppled off the top of the mountain, and there's no end in sight how far they're going down.
Well, I think what happened with them was that they not to knock the Phillies, but the Phillies all got old at the same time, which is a common thing. Same thing happened to the Yankees, and it's happened tons of times to teams in the past. I think what happened with the Braves is they tried to go young, but don't forget they had all those losing years where they were drafting and built a sensational farm system. Then they started winning, and they had all those years of winning, and you don't draft as high. And they tried to make moves. They had, as you said, they had a couple of good seasons there, 94 and 92 wins, and they tried to buy players to fill in the slots to win, and it didn't work. And now they're trying to dump some of these players, and I think with the new general manager, that they're going back in time and trying to build through the farm system again. And it's going to take some time, but the injuries do not help. And who knows? Maybe the philosophy in the mind has changed, and throughout the whole organization with pitching, and maybe it's showing itself now.
Yeah, that's for sure. We'll have to see what happens with the Braves, and this will be a good test for your Mets. See if they can whip those Braves here in spring training, even though it's just passing the first week of spring training season. Of course, a lot of the eyes are on the Miami Marlins and how good they'll do this year in the NL East. They're predicted to do second place. Last year they only had 77 wins, though, Gary, so I'm not so sure that that's a done deal yet, but they did pick up some great players in the offseason. Of course, they signed Stanton to the long-term deal, but I'm still out on the Marlins as far as them finishing in second place. How about you on them?
Well, the Marlins are going to be a better team. Remember, last year they were in the midst of everything till the second half, kind of fell off a little bit, and then they lost Stanton the last month or so. So that really hurt them. They've got a good young team. They've made some, as you said, they've made some moves, brought in some more talent. They're going to have to be watched, but I don't think they're quite there yet. They're going to be dangerous within a year or two, but I think I got to go with my Mets for second at this point in time. I don't know if they'll challenge the Nationals, but we'll see. I think they'll be second place. They finished tied for second last year with 79 wins. Not very impressive. But I think they can improve upon that by 10 or 11 games. And it's a different attitude in camp. They have Harvey back, and he brings a certain swagger with him and a certain level of confidence. And I saw him pitch yesterday, and that performance was unbelievable for some guy coming back. But the point to remember with him, too, is, and he may be a case study for this whole Tommy John surgery stuff, is they kept him out. They didn't let him pitch. He could have pitched the end of last year, and they kept him out. He was throwing, of course, but they kept him out. So he's a good, I think it's 17 or 18 months off the surgery.
Yeah, so he should be well rested, ready to go this season.
And they usually say that it's the second year after that people look, seem to come back into form. They did a list of longest guys that came back. Lackey, I think John Lackey had it, and I think he was 24 months. Other guys were 12 months. Strasburg came back in a little over 12 months, but Strasburg has struggled. He hasn't been a dominating pitcher we all thought he was going to be. The velocity is there. Everything seems fine, but there's something lacking. Harvey, we'll see. It was 2 innings in a spring training game, the third spring training game, so it doesn't really hold a lot of weight. But for the Mets, it does, because of just the performance and seeing him on the mound again.
Yeah, and the strange thing about Harvey was the controversies that he got into around the time he was injured. A couple weird stories came out about him, different things here and there. I don't even recall the specifics of each story, but you kind of wonder where those came from with Harvey. Was he feeling too much of his own persona, so to speak?
I think he was reading a little bit of press clippings, and I think he enjoys going out. Now, there's been no stories about him drinking or anything like that, but he has been seen at. He's a big Ranger fan, a big hockey fan, and he was seen a number of times at Ranger games, and some people complained about that. He also, I think he was at Derek Jeter's last game, and people weren't too happy about that. He said a few things on Twitter he probably shouldn't have said, and that caused some problems. But I really think that the Mets and him have sat down and worked it out, and I think he wanted to come back after 12 months, and I think the Mets made the right decision, and I think he realizes it at this point now that they may have made the right decision and really helped him out by making him sit. And it could be, as I said, it could be a blueprint for other teams to follow. If I was Miami, I'd be checking this out with Jose Fernandez. Why rush him back this year?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at his age, let him sit out. Maybe you want to bring him back in August or something if you're in the race. But he started last year, I don't know, May or June, he had the surgery. So I don't, miss the year, go after next year. It's a young team. They're going to have another year's experience. Stanton's still 24 or something. So it's not like he's getting older. You got to win for him. So I think it's a long run thing, and I think they're better off doing it that way too.
Yes, they are. So talking more about the American League now, over in the American League Central, Gary, the Kansas City Royals, they ended a 29-year playoff drought in 2014. Can they do it again? They're predicted to be third in the American League Central this year. They had 89 wins last year, but do you still think they'll carry that magic in 2015?
I don't know. I don't see it. They've lost starting pitching, and their bullpen has to repeat what it did. Boy, I don't know. It's going to be tough, but they'll be in the mix. I just don't know if they'll. They're not the Cinderella story now. People will be gunning for them.
Yeah, and just below them, predicted in 5th place in the AL Central, the Minnesota Twins. They've been on a drought since 2011. They were winning 63 games in 2011, 66 in 2012. They tied that in 2013 and pushed it up to 70 wins in 2014. So the Minnesota Twins are now on the drought there in the American League Central. Be interesting to see how they look to improve, if any. And it's going to be an interesting season so far with the start of all these spring training games, Gary.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, and especially if you go to the games and in the food courts, it's going to be a lot of interesting thing. And you have a story on some new food items.
Yes, I do. The Cardinals, St. Louis Cardinals, inviting fans out to the stadium in St. Louis for a Sunday brunch tomorrow. It's going to take place on March 8th, and I wish I had my Manycam setup going for our viewers of the YouTube video, but take a listen to these entrees they're going to have for the Sunday brunch, Gary, tomorrow. Grilled and chilled shrimp, steamed mussels, cocktail sauce, lemon wedges, sushi, wasabi, antipasta, an omelet station, breakfast potatoes, peppers and onions, eggs Benedict, smoked bacon, country sausage. Wow, what a great Sunday brunch it sounds like at the St. Louis Cardinals Nation there at the stadium in St. Louis tomorrow.
Not exactly usual ballpark fare, but that's all changing as well.
Yeah, they're doing it right out there. Of course, a lot of the stadiums now are building these little entertainment complexes just outside of the stadium. The Cardinals did it. The Phillies have a little entertainment zone, even though it's not owned by the Phillies. They have some restaurants. Really, this the first I've seen of such a great offering for the fans there. Really nice food for the fans to get with on a Sunday, spring training season. And another food story here, Gary, which is kind of a theme of our show we're picking up on, a special offering from the Arizona Diamondbacks this year. It's a hot dog, and it's really not your typical hot dog. It's sort of a dessert. They're calling it a churro dog. It has 3 scoops of ice cream um, with some vanilla and chocolate, and also hot fudge and caramel on top of whipped cream, and surrounded by a donut. So it looks like a hot dog, but it's actually dessert. They're going to be offering that at the Arizona Diamondbacks ballpark this year.
I'd like to see a picture of that. You.
And again, yeah, I would love to have brought our listeners a picture of that, because it actually looks like a hot dog, but it's a dessert, and the bun is made of a donut. So it actually looks like a hot dog bun, but it's a donut with a sort of a sweet stick acting as the hot dog, so to speak. And this thing, I'd love to see the calories in this.
Well, it sounds healthy. It covers all the food groups, so fine by me.
Well, I used to think a Whopper or a Big Mac was good for you because, yeah, it has all the food groups. It's got lettuce, onions, pickles. These are great things for you, supposedly, but we all know that isn't true. So maybe for the next show, I'll do some research on how many calories these desserts that some of these ballparks are offering, and of course the price. I didn't see that either, but the churro dog making its debut at Chase Field when the season starts up.
And we always seem to get the food, don't we?
We got to bring the food into it. It's part of the baseball thing.
It's certainly. And Arizona, I think, weren't they the home of that big foot-long thing too? That huge sausage or hot dog or something that they had there. I mean, they seem to be quite inventive and big on the food out in Arizona. That's for sure.
Yep. Well, we want to invite our listeners to become a supporter of the show, become a patron of the show. Go right on over to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/MLB This Week, all one word. It's the independent podcast brought to you by Gary and myself every week that the baseball season is on, and we go year-round. So we even offer the podcast in the off-season as well. Now it's time for you to show your support. You can become a patron to the show by just giving $1 or $2 a month or more if you'd like. And, of course, we'll be putting any of the proceeds back into the show, buying things we need to do the show, things like that. And Gary's still waiting on our first couple supporters, but it's a great promotion. If you'd like to take part in it, go to MLBThisWeek.com. Under our shows, you can see a link right to that, and you can become a patron of the show.
Yeah, and I hope people will consider it. It's a nice way to help out the show, and it doesn't cost you a lot of money. You can get in, I think, at $2 a month or whatever. So I hope everybody will take the opportunity to at least go check it out.
Absolutely. It's a great thing that Patreon does there for artists. They support different painters, people that do creative works on the web, and, of course, podcasting is one of them. Gary, you have a story on the Cubbies out in Chicago. They're going to honor Ernie Banks with something special.
Well, they planning to do things all season, and they've started it in the Cactus League play yesterday or 2 days ago with when they opened up with a split squad games, and they opened it up with, fittingly enough, they played 2 games. So, Ernie Banks was famous for saying, let's play 2. Well, they opened up their Cactus League season playing a split squad game, and both squads wore a special hat that had a big number 14 on the front to honor Ernie Banks. The special caps were just one of the special nods the franchise prepares to honor Mr. Cub all season. They had a game against the Athletics in Mesa, and it was a pregame video tribute and a moment of silence. And number 14 was also mowed into the grass in center field. So the Cubs are also going to wear a patch on their uniforms all season in memory of Banks. And as I said, there's many more tributes to come during this summer. So Chicago, he was Mr. Cub. He was the face of that franchise for a number of years. Even after he retired, he was still Mr. Cub. And it's hard to think about the Chicago Cubs and not Ernie Banks. So their little special tribute with special hats, and as I said, they'll be wearing patches and doing much more things the entire season.
That's very cool. And of course, as I've said before, Chicago, a great town to see a game. If you want to travel this season, maybe you're on the East Coast or the West Coast, you want to see a great baseball town, take a trip out to Chicago. You never forget it. Gary, I was back there in, God, it seems only yesterday, but 1999 I made a trip out to Wrigley Field for a couple games, and I was just mesmerized by the great fans that are out there, the nice people that work in the stands and things like that. Not that they're not nice around the East Coast, but it was just a different feeling of baseball out there with the ivy and things like that. So I would recommend it for anybody that's a baseball fan. Take a trip to a new stadium and see how they do things in a different stadium.
And you hear that a lot about how nice they are out there at the ballpark. So yeah, it's a great place, but would recommend wait until the summertime because they still got like 14 feet of snow out there. So if you're from the Northeast, you don't want to go for more snow. And besides, there's nothing going on there now, and not even sure if they have any bleachers in Wrigley Field so far. And I wonder how that whole reconstruction and renovation project, they must have been pushed back with all the bad weather that we've been having, especially in Chicago. I haven't looked into that. I'll have to check into that and give you a report next week.
Yeah, the last thing I heard was in the past couple days, Chicago, the Cubs, was going to request to Chicago, the city of Chicago, 24-hour construction to begin on this because they have fallen behind so far. It's already 1 month till baseball starts as of yesterday, and yeah, they have plenty of work ahead of them. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with this, but of course the neighborhood that Wrigley Field is in, a lot of the people don't want 24-hour construction, but the Cubbies have no alternative. They need to get this job done, and that's the latest that I've heard. They're requesting 24-hour construction.
Yeah, and of course they didn't get a break with the weather this year, so.
No, not at all. Well, moving on with the podcast here and our show, MLB This Week. A great thing that the Mets did, they honored the families of slain New York City police officers. Over the weekend, they invited them to attend weekend events there in Port St. Lucie, Florida. David Wright, a big part of all of this. Of course, he made phone calls to the families of Ramos and Lou after they were shot in New York. Tough job for him to do. An article online says David Wright recalling sitting at home trying to come up with words that he would give to the families when he called the children of the families of a couple of the cops there that got shot and killed. And it was around Christmas time, so it was a real tough thing for David Wright to do. but the Mets pitching in here and having the families flown down to spring training, and it's really, really a nice thing to do, Gary. Really brings a warmth to your heart when you hear stories like this.
Yeah, and Rich, you don't hear a lot of these stories. Not even here. We didn't even hear much about this. I just happened to notice it. They had a little blurb on the game yesterday, or really, and we've been inundated here this week with the right telling off one of the rookie pitchers, or and rightfully so. He is the captain of the team, and the guy was supposed to be on the bench, and he made a rookie mistake. He got a little confused with the scheduling, ran into the clubhouse to get something to eat, and David Wright happened to come by and noted he wasn't supposed to be there, and gave him a piece of his mind, and he did the right thing. That's what you do as a captain. And the other big story this week here in New York has been the Daniel Murphy controversy with the whole Billy Beane visit, not the Moneyball Billy Beane, the other Billy Beane who declared that he was a homosexual. And Murphy, being a Christian, said he did not agree with that lifestyle. And look, I back the guy. I back him 100%. He's been called everything from a bigot to an ignoramus to all kinds of nasty comments, and I don't understand why you can't have a viewpoint anymore. Just because he doesn't agree with you doesn't mean that he's an ignorant or a bigot or a homophobe or any of that. I challenge the people on my show. Mm-hmm. And those that criticize him, maybe we should call them anti-religious or anti-Christian. And he's a Christian. He has his beliefs, and I back that 100%. But that's been the big story. And again, they take the controversial stories and the nice stories like this, and the ones that are warm-hearted and it shows compassion, and they throw those away. They don't want you to hear those things. So David Wright's having a good week here in the publicity category, as far as I'm concerned, with all he's done for these police officers and their families, I should say, of the slain police officers, and taking stand as captain of the Mets. And good for you, David. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, we love to hear great stories like this, as you said, Gary. And players should be able to have their own opinions without facing a lot of criticism. But certain media organizations, they feed off of this, and they like to twist and turn stories and present them in different ways that make you feel differently about them, perhaps. So we'll have to see it for what it is. And MLB This Week continues. And Gary, you have our final topic of the day.
Well, I thought we'd end on a little lighter note. This was a story that was actually about a week or so old by now, but the golfer Bubba Watson is apparently a big Cincinnati Reds fan. He is a minority owner of the Reds AA affiliate in Pensacola, and he was down at spring camp and received a tour, met players and coaches, including Billy Hamilton, the speedster that who was up for Rookie of the Year with the Cincinnati Reds. And Bubba Watson challenged him to a race to see who was faster. And I don't know. I mean, Bubba Watson's like a big 6'6" guy, and he thinks he can outrun Billy Hamilton, but Hamilton declined. Watson said he chickened out today. He's got to go stretch. They're making him do some physical stuff, so he gave me a bat and stuff. He played with the Blue Wahoos, and he's known for being kind of fast. Watson said, I start at second base, he starts at home, and in the clubhouse, said he could still beat me. There's no chance, but they're letting him run right now. They want him to stay healthy, I guess. So, Bubba Watson thinks he could beat Billy Hamilton in a race, but I think Billy Hamilton would be running right past him and might even double him up. So, but a little lighter story to end this week's show.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure he didn't really want to race him for sure. Kind of seemed like he really did. I'm reading some of the story here. Watson said, quote, he chickened out today. He's got to stretch.
Yeah.
He gave me a bat and some signed autograph things instead. So, yeah, lighthearted note there. Not so much sure that he was trying to get more publicity for himself there, was Bubba, but that's what spring training is all about, I guess.
Well, he's the number 2 ranked golfer in the world, and he's a Masters winner, so he's getting plenty of publicity himself. But I guess he just he's a good old country boy and having a little fun with himself. So.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's our edition of MLB for you this week. We thank you for listening to each and every podcast we do. We'll have a lot more great baseball talk for you on our next show. Gary, you have a great week, and it's time to watch some of that weekend baseball spring training games.
Yes, I'm going to go do that right now, Rich.